Hey, welcome here. My name is Andrew Plett. I'm the lead pastor at Mountain Park Church, and we are starting in on part 6 of our How to Pray series. Wherever you're listening or watching, I'm so thankful that you've taken time out to spend it with us. I believe that this could be transformative. Actually, this whole series, if you haven't listened to the previous 5 messages, you need to. You can do it on our website. You can follow us on Spotify or iTunes podcast. Subscribe to those. We'd love to have you join with us. Before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge, don't adjust the color on your screen. You might be looking at it going, man, the color's super off. Yeah, this is a golden brown tan I have on my arms. Just kidding. This is an Andrew tan, which means that it's mostly red and it starts out as a burn and then shifts to just slightly less red. So if you're looking at your screen and going, man, it seems really red, it is, because we finally had some nice weather here. All right, I digress. Let's head in to week number 6 of How to Pray. We've been talking about the Lord's Prayer now for a few weeks. We started this whole series with some basic biblical understanding of why we need to pray, how to pray, what prayer is, and now we're into the Lord's Prayer. We're beginning these 3 petitions of Jesus. So if you have a Bible, grab it. If you got a pen, grab it. We're going to underline some stuff. And you can open it to Matthew 6. The Lord's Prayer is found in Matthew 6 or Luke chapter 11. Today we're in Matthew 6. So here's how Jesus teaches his disciples how to pray. Therefore, you should pray like this. Again, I'll repeat this. Jesus is giving a command here, and it's a command that needs to be acted on a regular, ongoing basis. This is not a one-time thing. This is not a, hey, memorize it and then just quote it every now and then. This is a how you need to pray, what you need to practice in your daily life. Therefore, you should pray like this. Our Father in heaven, we covered that double section in the last couple of weeks. Our Father in heaven, your name be honored as holy. That's where we're going to stop for today. When new parents are picking out names for their kids now, a lot of us just go on Google and we just search, top names for 2020. And we're looking at, a list of hundreds of names for boys and girls. And when we had our kids, we kind of did the same thing. And you may have an idea of some names that you like, but you're just sort of checking around and seeing, I don't want to name my child the same one that 60 other thousand kids got named last year. And so you don't want to name your child, the most popular name, but you also don't want to give him sort of a weird name that he's going to just resent you for the rest of his life. And often that's just how we pick names now. But names in a biblical context had a lot more significance. From a scriptural or biblical context, when the Bible uses the phrase, the name of God, really what it means is God in all of his fullness, God in all of his attributes, God in all of his character, the wholeness or completeness of God is meant. In the Baker Encyclopedia of the Bible, it says this: in the scriptures, the name and person of God are inseparably related. This is in keeping with the biblical conception of what a name signifies. In the Hebrew language, the term for name most probably meant sign or distinctive mark. In the Greek language, name is derived from a verb which means to know. A name then indicates that by which a person or object is to be known. It's the essential character to which that name is given. So when Jesus is teaching his disciples and teaching us by saying, your name be honored as holy, what he's not saying is your title be honored as what is holy. Some sort of just superficial reflection of who you are. What he's saying is the whole essence of God is to be honored as holy in your life. Everything that makes up God, God's name is God's nature. God's name reveals his nature. In the book of Exodus, chapter 34, we have this amazing story, and one of the most vivid descriptions sort of God's name is given, and God is speaking to Moses here, and Moses has been leading, very reluctantly leading the whole nation of Israel. They've come out of Egypt, and things started off really good, but the wheels fell off the wagon right away for Moses. The nation, they don't really want to obey God. They want to obey God in principle, but when it comes down to action, they don't. They don't trust him. They don't actually see him as a qualified leader. They oppose him and they undercut him all the way. And Moses is saying to God, look, unless you go before us, I'm not going. But I need to know you. I want to know you more. I want to know what it looks like to be led by you. And so he asks God to show his face to him. And God says, I can't show you my face, but what I'll do is I'll pass by you and I'll let you see sort of the back side of me. And when I do that, I'm going to declare my name to you. And so in Exodus 34, verse 5, it says, the Lord came down in a cloud, stood with him there, and proclaimed his name, the Lord. The Lord passed in front of him and proclaimed. So this is what the Lord proclaims about his own name. This is where we begin to understand that the name is not just a title, but it's the summation of, his whole character and his nature. The Lord is a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in faithful love and truth, maintaining faithful love to 1,000 generations, forgiving iniquity, rebellion, and sin. But he will not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the father's iniquity on the children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generation. Moses immediately knelt low on the ground and worshiped. Then he said, my Lord, if I have indeed found favor with you, my Lord, please go with us, even though this stiff-necked people are here. Forgive our iniquity and our sin and accept us as your own possession. So God says, I'm going to declare to you my name. And what my name means is my nature and my character. And my character is rooted in love and faithfulness. I'm gracious and compassionate. He also says there that, I demand justice, that I'll bring justice, that I'm merciful, that I'm trustworthy, that I'm loving. All of these things make up the nature of God and are part of his name. So to give attention, as Jesus is directing his disciples to give attention to the name of God, to honor his name as holy in our life, means to give attention to God himself. Name equals nature and it equals presence. God's presence, what Jesus is saying is God's presence must take priority in our lives. It must actually take first place in us. If we are really to say that we are honoring and worshiping God, that his name is made holy in our life, that we're honoring him with our life, it means that we have to be attentive to steward his presence in our life. It means that his agenda becomes our agenda, not the other way around. So what Jesus is doing is he's saying right out of the gate here, disciples, you need to reorient your life, your priorities around God and not yourself. So what this does is it confronts our selfishness. It confronts our obsession with ourselves. It confronts our desire for our name to be the one that is respected, for our name to be the one that is recognized and revered. It confronts our desire to just come to God all the time with what we want and what we have and what we need and all of these things. What Jesus is saying is no, we need to make an intentional decision to honor the name of God, to honor his presence, and we do that in a few ways. In the Evangelical Dictionary of Biblical Theology, it says this: the theological significance that attaches to the name Yahweh, that's what scholars call the proper name for God, is multiple, judging from the etymology, but more particularly from the context in which the name is disclosed. The name signifies presence, God with. He is near and among his people. This overtone of presence is reiterated in the naming of the wilderness structure as tabernacle, literally God's dwelling. And in the promised name, Emmanuel, God is with us. So to say, hallowed be your name, if you're in the King James Version, or hallowed maybe is how you pronounce it, hallowed be your name, or God, may your name be honored as holy, is literally to say, God, I'm going to be attentive to your presence in my life. And your presence must take priority and precedent in my life. Those two words in my translation, your name be honored as holy. The words honored and holy are the same one in the original language, and they're verbs, actually. They're not a noun, it's not an adjective, it's a verb that means to sanctify, make holy, consecrate, or dedicate. So what Jesus is beginning to teach his disciples is that honoring God, worshiping him, making him first in our life demands action. It demands response from us. It's not just an intellectual idea or thought. It's not just a religious connotation. That honoring God, the true worship of God, is actually action-oriented and driven. We honor and worship him. I'm going to give you three sort of facets of that I believe we need to have in view at all times. Number one, we honor him in what we say, our expressions. Psalm 19, verse 14. I'm just going to turn there really quickly and read that to you. Psalm 19, verse 14 says this. It says, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Psalm 71, verse 8. There's so many Psalms that we could pick from here, but this is another one. Psalm 71, verse 8 says this, my mouth is full of praise. My mouth is full of praise and honor to you all day long. We need to begin at this place where when we come to God in prayer, it's not our needs and our wants and our lists that we come with, but it's honor and praise to him. Psalm 100 says we enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. We literally come near or close to God by coming with praise and thanksgiving. And this confronts our selfishness. It confronts our obsession with ourselves. It confronts our obsession with our own name, our reputation, our self-importance. What Jesus is saying is you need to lower yourself. Lower your self-importance. Lower your desire to be respected. Lower your desire to have your name be the name that everyone loves. Lower your desire to please people. Lower your desire to be, the object of your own, worship and affection. Some of us and some of you literally worship yourselves. And you never kind of say that, but you do it through all of your actions. And Jesus is saying, look, when you come to God in prayer, you need to first put focus and emphasis on him. And we do that through what we say. We do that by saying, Father, I honor you and your presence in my life. Your name is greater than every other name. Father, I worship you today because you will never leave me or forsake me. You are clothed in majesty and with strength. Father, I honor you today. You are the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I honor you today. Jesus, you are the champion of heaven. You are my Redeemer. I'm so thankful for what you did on the cross. I honor you today. Father, my focus and my thoughts and my words are directed toward you today. So the first facet of true worship is what we say. It's the expression that comes out of our mouth. It's the laying down of our tongue to speak what is, what is thankfulness and honor and worship to God first. Number two, after our expression is what we give. We can't pretend to live a life of worship if we're not surrendering our resources and our activity to God. Proverbs 3, verse 9. I'm going to turn there. Says this: honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Honor the Lord with everything you have, everything that He's blessed you with, not just with your words. Don't think that true worship is just coming to church and singing a few songs for a couple of minutes. It's not just belting out your favorite songs while you're driving. That's not the fullness or the completeness of worship. That's part of it. But worship involves the surrendering and the giving back to God of the resources and the things that He's blessed us with. It says, then your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. If you want to see increase in your life, then you need to offer God as worship back to Him the things that He's already blessed you with. We need to honor God by giving our time and attention back to Him. So often, God convicted me of this the other day. He said, Andrew, you've scheduled me and time for me into your schedule. Well, when was the last time you asked me when I wanted you to schedule that time? Have you asked me about when I want to meet with you? I've been meeting with you based on your demands for your whole life. But what about when I want to meet with you? Do we give God our time? Do we give Him priority of attention in our lives? We honor God by giving Him our talent, our gifting. He's uniquely created you with gifting, and it's honoring, it's worship when you give that back to God, when you honor Him and say, God, I'm surrendering my gifting back to you. Instead of just using it to gratify yourself and to live for your own desires, when you say, God, this stuff that you've gifted me with, I'm going to serve you with it. We honor Him by bringing our tithe, our resources. We can't claim to worship God and not tithe. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that's offensive to you, but it's the truth. You can't claim to be putting God first in your life if you refuse to give your resources, your time, and your gifting back to Him. Number 3, this is the third facet of worship that we need to understand is part of this complete worship that Jesus is talking about. This is the honoring of the name of God and making it holy. We worship Him, we honor Him by how we live. Romans 12:1, back into the New Testament. This is the writer Paul now speaking. And Paul knew a thing or two about this. He said, Romans 12:1, therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true worship. Don't be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What Paul is literally saying is you need to not only give, your gifting to God, not only your resources, but your whole life to Him, your whole body to Him. Not only the things that people see, but the things they don't see. Your heart, your desire, your emotion, your thought life. The things that you do in secret, are they honoring to God? We can't claim to be worshiping Him when we just belt out a few songs now and then, or when we write a check now and then. We are worshiping Him when what we do in secret and in private honors Him. That's a startling and a convicting thing to think about. Just review your last week. Review the secret things you thought or said that no one heard, the secret things that you believed or did last week. Were they honoring to God? Was His name being honored as holy in those moments of your life? This is what true worship literally means. It's all of these things together. And this is what Jesus is saying. It's our words won't carry weight without the work needed in these other areas of our life. Our praise to Him with our lips will mean nothing if our actions and the things going on in private in our heart and in our emotion and in our life are not driving our words. Often our worship is flat. We come to church and we don't feel like singing. We're disgruntled about it. We complain about it. We're not amped up for it or hyped up for it. You know what is often at work? It's because for the previous 6 days of the week, you haven't been honoring God in the private things of your life. You haven't honored him by surrendering your gifts and resources to him. You haven't honored him by making him a priority with your time or your lips. You've been so focused on yourself and meeting your own needs and gratifying your own desires that, of course, when you come to church, you don't really want to sing. You don't really want to be there to do that, because so often for so many of us, the sum total of the last 6 days has just been so self-focused. And this is what Jesus is abruptly sort of shifting for the disciples. And so these words of Jesus, we need to understand that the Greek, we're going to do a bit of an analysis here. These petitions are not requests or questions. These 3 petitions that we're going to uncover this week and in the following 2 weeks are in the aorist passive imperative third person tense that may mean nothing to you, and that's okay. I'm going to do my best to kind of boil it down. It's hard for me to understand, and it's very complex for even Bible translators to convey this. And the reason is that we don't have this tense in the English language. If you would, one of the best ways to describe this would be, 2 people in view. Just picture sort of a scene of a movie. You have 2 people in view, and one person is giving a command to the other person. But there's a third person who's out of view, who's in the shadows, who's in the dark, who we don't see. It's the job of that third person who we can't see to carry out the command of the first person. This is a command. What Jesus is saying here is literally, Father, your name must be made holy in my life. Your name must be made holy in my time. Your name must be made holy by me surrendering my resources and my gifting to you. Your name must be made holy in those secret, private places of my life, in how I live. Your name must be made holy. And it will not be made holy if those 3 things aren't working together, what we say and what we give and how we live. This is not just a passive sort of statement of Jesus. This is a command that we are to give. And I'm going to talk about this in just 1 second. So this is an aorist passive imperative third person. This is cannot be thought of purely in a defined time. It's undefined time-wise. Some people make the Lord's Prayer about an eschatological end, meaning that it's all about, what happens when God's kingdom finally comes on the earth, when Jesus comes to rule and reign. And of course, that's part of it, but there is no defined time here, which means that we need to make this a reality in our present. It's not a question, it's a command. The aorist tense indicates simple action. And if we're to take sort of the force of Jesus deadly seriously in the Greek, there's a great urgency. The urgency, one scholar says, is overwhelming. So whenever we encounter this tense in the Greek, we need to think imperative. Some kind of command is being given. Now, one of the problems we have is we, and rightfully so in one respect, we can't imagine the idea of giving God a command. God, make your name holy in my life today. God, I am asking you, make it holy. Make it holy in my desires. Make it holy in my thought life. Make it holy with my gifting. Make it holy in the resources that I'm surrendering to you. We have a really hard time in our culture of ever thinking that we could demand anything of God, but it wasn't so in Jesus' time and in his culture. This wasn't out of the question. And one story you could look to in the Bible is the prodigal son, who demands of his father his inheritance, and his father gives it to him. That's a beautiful picture of what I think Jesus is telling us to come to God with. He says, make your name holy. So as grammarians have noted, people much smarter than I, it's a mood of contingent reality, and the reality awaits the action of the person receiving the message. So there's someone who must act. And part of this, there's two sides to this. Part of this acting, when we talk about worship, and I'm going to suggest to you that worship in this context, in this way, becomes warfare. In 2 Chronicles 20:21, it was the worshipers who led the army. In Acts 16, the story of Paul and Silas in prison, they're worshiping at midnight in the middle of the night, and the chains fall off, and God supernaturally releases them from prison. But it wasn't because they were just singing, I'm no longer a slave to fear. It wasn't because they were just singing words. It was because of the faithfulness and obedience of stewarding the presence of God in these other parts of their life that God's supernatural activity, the warfare in the supernatural realm, was won by God. We like the idea of just kind of singing away the battle. I'm going to sing, and worship is my warfare. There's a song about that. And in one sense, it's true, but we can't be presumptive that just singing a chorus is going to win the battle for us. Declaring it out of our mouth is like the last stage in our warfare. We need to actually begin to submit to God. James 4 says we must submit to God, and then as a second part, resist the devil. This is worship. This is what Jesus is saying. God, your name must be made holy. I'm going to submit to your lordship and authority in my life. I'm going to submit to it. Like David said, we actually need to remind or tell our soul what it needs to do. In 1 Thessalonians, I'm going to get to that psalm from David in a second. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul says that we need to bring our whole spirit, soul, and body under the authority. We need to submit it to God. This is the first side of warfare, is our submitting to God. David said we need to command our soul. My soul, bless the Lord. That's a command. I'm going to tell you, my soul, my mind, will, and emotions, you must submit to the holiness of God. I'm tempted to do this one thing right now, but I'm commanding you right now, thought life, right now, desire, right now, physical urge. Teenagers with your boyfriends or girlfriends, you need to literally be in that space and command your body to come into alignment with the holiness of God, or your thought life, or these things. We must command them. I will tell my spirit, soul, and body, you must submit to the holiness of God. In Proverbs 2:1, Solomon said we need to direct our heart. So that's the one half of it. And the other half is that we need to then speak for God. We need to address the spiritual opposition around us. This is part of worship that Jesus was talking about. We submit and then we resist. This is how we make the name of God holy in our life. It is an action word, and we must command it to be holy. Father, I command your name to be honored by my whole spirit, soul, and body. And I command anything that opposes your glory in my life to be bound. I command it to come out of the shadows and to be revealed so that you can identify it to me and I can deal with it. God, is there anything that's blocking the glory of God in my life? It's this kind of worship that changes our perspective in life, and this kind of worship that Jesus is calling us to live.